You already know more than you think. You've picked up on things. A glance that didn't last long enough, a smile that didn't match the tone, the subtle tension in someone's shoulders right before they said, "I'm fine." These things weren't accidents. They were signs. You just didn't know how to read them yet. But once you do, you won't be able to unsee them. You'll walk into a room and feel that the truth is sitting quietly beneath the surface. And this isn't about manipulation. It's not about tricks or tactics. It's about clarity. It's about compassion. It's about finally learning how to read the language that people speak when they're not speaking at all. Most people are walking around in mass, some elegant, some cracked, some so convincing even they don't realize they're wearing one. But the truth always leaks out. In fact, Nietzsche believed that if you paid attention, people tell you everything. Not with their words, with their patterns, their choices, their reactions. There are inconsistencies between their story and their silence. He didn't teach this to help you judge others. He taught it to help you stop being fooled. Because once you understand the signs, you stop reacting and start understanding. And through understanding, something remarkable happens. Judgment dissolves. Because when you really see someone, not the mask, not the performance, but the wounded soul beneath it, you can no longer hate them. You see the fear behind the anger, the loss behind the arrogance, the child behind the critic. Let's start at the beginning. Everyone wears a mask, not because they're deceitful, not because they're fake, but because they're scared. At some point, we all learned that being ourselves wasn't safe. Maybe we were too loud, too soft, too needy, too different. And so we adapted. We created a version of ourselves that we thought the world could tolerate, a persona, a defense mechanism. The one who's always agreeable might not be kind. They might just be terrified of conflict. The one who laughs the loudest might be drowning in silence when they're alone. The mask is not a lie. The mask is the shield. But no shield is perfect. And if you watch closely, it slips. The first place it slips is tension. Tension is the truth trying to break through the script. Someone avoids a topic too quickly. Someone overreacts to something minor. Someone laughs too long or doesn't laugh at all when they should. These are cracks in the mask. And Nietzsche taught that these moments matter more than any explanation someone gives you. Because the truth doesn't speak clearly, it whispers. And it waits to see if you're listening. People don't always know they're doing it. In fact, most of the time, they believe their performance. But here's where it gets powerful. What someone hates in others is often what they can't face in themselves. This is a projection, and it's everywhere. And the person who constantly criticizes others for arrogance might be deeply insecure about their own worth. The one who shames others for dishonesty might be hiding a truth they haven't been brave enough to face. We attack what we fear lives within us. So the next time someone passionately condemns a trait in someone else, ask yourself, what part of themselves are they trying to silence? And this leads us to something subtle but essential. Silence is louder than speech. Think about it. We're taught to trust words, but Nietzsche warned us that words are tools of survival. They're scripts, not confessions. If you want to know someone, don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they avoid. The hesitation before answering. The quick shift of topic when it gets too close. The sudden burst of energy when they feel exposed. These silences, these dodges, these pauses, they're more honest than any sentence ever spoken. Now, one of the most deceptive signals of all is excessive virtue. When someone is loudly proclaiming their goodness, always correcting others, always preaching, they may not be moral. They may be terrified. Morality at its loudest can become vanity. Sometimes we shout our values to convince ourselves we have them. Nietzsche saw this as the will to power in disguise, a form of superiority masquerading as morality. But real virtue doesn't perform. Real goodness doesn't need applause. Now here's a truth that changes everything. People don't lie to you first. They lie to themselves. I'm fine. I don't care. I'm over it. These aren't weapons, they're shields. They're things people have repeated to themselves so many times that they started to believe them. Nietzsche didn't see self-deception as evil. He saw it as necessary as survival. When life gets too painful, we rewrite the story. We create a version of ourselves we can live with. And that's why someone's inconsistencies don't mean they're trying to fool you. They're often trying to survive themselves. But if you know how to read the gaps, the contradictions, the tension between who they say they are and how they behave, you start to see what they can't even be. One of the most important patterns to watch is this. Wherever someone feels superior, they're usually hiding a deep sense of inferiority. This is classic Nietzsche. The person who always needs to be the best, who dominates conversations, who lists their achievements without being asked, they're not doing it from abundance. They're doing it out of fear. The child in them is still trying to be seen. They are still trying to prove they matter. And they believe that if they stop performing, they'll disappear. But real confidence doesn't compete. It just exists. It doesn't need to win or prove or dominate. It just is. And when you see this, really see it, you stop being intimidated by arrogance. You start being curious about it. What wound is it hiding? What moment in their past made them believe they had to be loud to be valued? The truth is, reading people isn't about judging them. It's about understanding what they never got to say out loud. So the next time someone interrupts you, constantly remember they may not be trying to be rude. They might just be terrified of being forgotten. The person who brags endlessly might be trying to drown out a voice in their head that says they're not enough. The person who avoids eye contact while telling you, "I'm okay," believe their body, not their words. These truths are not tools of manipulation. They are acts of compassion. Because the more clearly you see someone, the less likely you are to hate them. And that Nietzsche believed was the beginning of connection. He never taught this to help you control others. He taught it to help you stop being fooled by them and by yourself. When you start to see the mask crack, recognize the tension, and hear the patterns speak louder than the performance, something inside you shifts. You no longer see the world as full of threats. You start to see it as full of people, each of them wearing armor that once kept them safe but now keeps them trapped. And if you've ever felt that too, like no one really sees you, like the real you has been buried under who you had to become to survive, then maybe this isn't just about reading others. Maybe this is also about remembering yourself. Because behind every person you meet is a survival story. Most people aren't hiding from you, they're hiding from themselves. And they've been doing it so long, they don't even realize it anymore. Their habits aren't random. Their choices aren't coincidences. They're clues. And once you know what to look for, those clues become a language, a way of hearing pain that was never spoken. Let's look deeper. One of Nietzsche's most profound observations was this: most human behavior isn't driven by desire. It's driven by unconscious fear. Why does someone over-explain every little thing? Why does someone else dominate every conversation or disappear completely when things get emotional? Why does someone agree to things they clearly don't want and then resent you for it later? It's not logical. It's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of looking weak, fear of not being enough. And if you want to understand someone, stop asking what they want. Ask what they're afraid of losing. That's where the truth lives. Fear doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like control. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like silence. But underneath it all, it's always fear. And fear leaves fingerprints on everything we touch. And here's something few people are willing to admit. When someone criticizes constantly, they're not speaking truth, they're confessing pain. Listen closely the next time someone mocks others for being emotional. Chances are they're terrified of their own feelings. The man who always belittles people for being too sensitive, he was probably never allowed to express emotion himself. The woman who makes fun of people for caring too much, she's likely carrying wounds so deep that caring now feels dangerous. Criticism is often projection, and projection isn't just a defense, it's a spotlight. It tells you exactly what someone's struggling to accept in themselves. Nietzsche understood this long before psychology caught up. He knew that the way someone reacts to the world is more about their inner landscape than about reality. And if you learn to listen to the reaction instead of reacting back, you'll start to see the map of their pain unfold right in front of you. Now let's talk about confidence, the polished, Instagram-ready, always knows what to say kind of confidence. The kind that looks unshakable. Often that's not confidence, it's guilt wearing a suit. It's a person who feels like they have something to prove, something to outrun, something they're trying to bury so deep the performance becomes their prison. Nietzsche noticed this especially in leaders, preachers, teachers, and performers. Those who seemed the most certain were often the most broken. Because real peace is quiet, it doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't shout. It doesn't over-prepare. It doesn't dominate the room. It simply is. So when you see someone who seems too composed, too perfect, too loud, don't feel small in their presence. Be curious. What are they running from? What guilt are they trying to cover up with certainty? Closely tied to this is an exaggeration. And once you see it, you'll see it everywhere. The person who says, "I don't care what anyone thinks of me," probably cares deeply. The person who says, "I'm always happy," probably isn't. We exaggerate when we're trying to convince not just others but ourselves. When someone's statements are too absolute, too extreme, or too rehearsed, it's usually because there's a deep uncertainty underneath. Nietzsche believed that extremism in any form wasn't strength, it was imbalance. And when someone keeps turning up the volume, you have to ask, what are they trying to drown out? It's easy to judge people who exaggerate. But when you see it for what it is, not arrogance, but fear, you begin to soften. You stop rolling your eyes and you start listening deeper. You stop reacting and you start reading between the lines. Another form of this, and maybe one of the most misunderstood, is the desire for control. Some people need it like oxygen. They micromanage every little detail. They have backup plans for their backup plans. They don't just prepare, they over-prepare. And when life throws them something unpredictable, they spiral. At first, it looks like discipline, like being on top of things. But Nietzsche saw something different. He saw that the need to control the outer world almost always came from a feeling of chaos in the inner world. These people aren't controlling because they're strong. They're controlling because they're afraid that if they ever let go, it will all fall apart. That if they're not perfect, they'll be abandoned. That if they don't hold it all together, no one will catch them. Control is rarely about power, it's about fear. And fear always has a backstory. And now we come to something hauntingly familiar to our modern world, the performance of self, the curated identity, the constant need to be seen, liked, validated. We live in a culture of performance. Social media amplifies it, rewards it, and reinforces it. And Nietzsche, long before algorithms and filters, saw it coming. He warned that the louder the performance, the emptier the core. Those who constantly seek to be seen often believe they are invisible without it. That the drama, the noise, the endless updates, they're not signs of someone with something to say. They're signs of someone afraid that without the noise, they'll be forgotten. This doesn't make them weak, it makes them human. Because every performance is a plea. Please see me. Please love me. Please tell me I matter. And the louder the plea, the more invisible the person feels. Now imagine seeing this in someone and not judging them, not resenting them, but understanding this isn't about ego, it's about fear of being erased. Suddenly you stop reacting to their behavior and start recognizing the wound beneath it. That's the power of Nietzsche's psychological truths. They don't make you better than others. They make you more compassionate toward them. And when all these patterns start connecting in your mind, something incredible begins to happen. You walk into a conversation and feel the hidden story before a word is spoken. You see someone interrupting constantly, and you realize it's not arrogance, it's desperation. You see someone posting endlessly about how happy they are, and instead of rolling your eyes, you wonder what they're trying to silence. You see the boss who always needs control, and instead of fearing them, you see the kid inside them who's terrified to let go. You're not reading minds, you're reading masks. And when you see through a mask, you don't just understand the person you see the moment when they put the mask on. You see the survival instinct behind the habit, the pain behind the projection, the loneliness behind the laughter. But here's what Nietzsche would want you to remember. This skill isn't for power, it's not for advantage. It's for grace. Because the more clearly you see someone, the more gently you treat them. And when you see the truth beneath the performance, you no longer need to judge. You just understand. And perhaps the most beautiful part, as you start seeing others more clearly, you begin to see yourself more honestly too. You catch yourself over-explaining and ask, what am I afraid of? You notice your own desire for control and ask, where do I feel unsafe inside? You recognize your own performance, and instead of being ashamed, you become curious. You begin to remember you too put on a mask once, not because you were fake, but because you were trying to survive. And that realization doesn't weaken you, it frees you. The most powerful realizations are often the quietest. They arrive not like thunder, but like a whisper that you've somehow always known, just never put into words. That's what happens when you begin to read people not through their words, not through their performance, but through the subtle traces of truth they leave behind. And when you've trained your eye to see the patterns, you'll begin to notice something deeper still. You'll begin to realize that behind every behavior is a belief, and behind every belief is a wound. The way someone speaks isn't just shaped by education or personality, it's shaped by pain. Nietzsche saw this more clearly than most. He understood that people don't speak from logic. They speak from protection. So when someone says, "I don't believe in love," you might think they're being cold or cynical. But look closer. They're not announcing a belief. They're defending a scar. Somewhere in their past, they loved and weren't loved back. Or they needed connection and were met with rejection. And now, to avoid that pain again, they turn belief into armor. They don't really think love is fake. They just don't want to feel foolish for hoping anymore. That's how it works. The mind creates the logic, but the wound comes first. Once you see this, you stop asking, "Why do they think that?" and start asking, "What are they afraid will happen again?" You stop taking opinions as attacks and start seeing them as shields. Suddenly, people aren't combative. They're just protecting something you can't see yet. If you really want to know someone's character, don't look at how they treat people in power. Look at how they respond to vulnerability. How do they act when there's nothing to gain, no applause to be earned? Nietzsche believed real strength wasn't proven through domination, it was revealed through restraint. If someone mocks weakness, it's because they fear their own. If someone punishes mistakes ruthlessly, it's because they were never allowed to make any. But the person who can sit with someone's sadness without fixing it, without running away, without making it about them, that person isn't performing strength. They're living it. The truth is that how someone reacts to power tells you who they aspire to be. But how they respond to weakness tells you who they are. And in a world full of noise, one of the most desperate cries is the cry to be seen. Have you ever met someone who always needs attention, who enters every room like they're afraid of fading into the wall, who tells every story as if their life depends on being interesting, desirable, and unforgettable? At first, it looks like confidence, but it isn't. It's fear, fear of being invisible, fear of being erased. The irony is that the louder someone becomes in that desperation, the less they are truly seen. Nietzsche saw this for what it was, not vanity, not arrogance, but a child deep down begging not to be forgotten. Someone who learned long ago that silence meant abandonment, and so now they fill the void with noise. Not because they love the spotlight, but because they're terrified of disappearing. And this next truth might be the hardest to admit because it lives in all of us. The person someone attacks is often the person they envy. Think about it. It's easier to tear someone down than to admit you wish you could be like them. Envy rarely announces itself honestly. It disguises itself as criticism. So when someone mocks someone's success, ridicules someone's confidence, or gossips about someone who seems free, it's not just because they dislike them. It's because something in that person reminds them of a version of themselves they've abandoned. And instead of reaching for it, they try to destroy it. But here's the truth about envy. It's not hatred. It's longing, longing wrapped in shame. It's the soul saying, "I want that too, but I don't believe I'm allowed to have it." When you can see this clearly in others, you become immune to petty hate. And when you can see it in yourself, you become free from it. So much of what people do, they don't do from conscious belief. They do it from repetition, from survival, from childhood. Nietzsche didn't believe people were rational creatures making clean, conscious decisions. He believed people were haunted, haunted by old roles they were forced to play, by scripts they didn't write but kept reciting anyway. The person who never listens, maybe they grew up never being heard. The one who avoids all emotion, maybe they were punished for having feelings. The one who constantly performs for love, even in toxic situations, maybe they were raised to believe love had to be earned. You think you're seeing an adult, but you're often seeing a child still playing the role they had to take on to stay safe. Behavior isn't random, it's a biography. And when you understand that, judgment starts to dissolve. Because the moment you ask, who did they have to become, you stop asking, what's wrong with them, and start wondering what happened to them. And maybe the deepest truth of all, the one Nietzsche didn't scream but whispered, is this: people confess all the time. Not with their words, but with their patterns. A person who ghosts every time things get close isn't rude, they're scared. A person who works constantly and can't sit still isn't ambitious, they're running from silence. A person who flirts with everyone but never connects isn't shallow, they're afraid of being truly seen. These patterns aren't personality traits, they're confessions. They're saying, this is how I protect myself. This is where I was hurt. This is what I fear will happen again. And if you know how to listen, really listen, you'll hear the pain before it's ever spoken. And that more than anything makes you powerful. Not because you now have some secret technique, but because you hold a mirror. You become someone who doesn't react blindly but reflects deeply. You become someone who understands instead of judges. Someone who sees and still chooses grace. Because here's the twist. All these truths, they're not just about them. They're about you. You've seen yourself in these patterns too. You've projected, you've performed, you've exaggerated. You've criticized what you were afraid of. You've overexplained when you felt small. You've chased control when you felt chaos inside. And that's okay. That's human. The point isn't to be perfect. The point is to be aware. Because once you see your own patterns, you stop being owned by them. Once you see where they began, you can choose whether to keep them. This isn't the end, it's the beginning. A new way of seeing, a new way of listening, a new way of being. Nietzsche didn't want us to become cold analyzers of human behavior. He wanted us to awaken. We need to realize that everything we judge others lives in us too. That everything we admire in others is something we long to embody. So if something in you felt seen during this, if you found yourself nodding, pausing, remembering, don't run from it. Sit with it. Ask what it's showing you. Comment if you feel called to share, because there's strength in honesty. And there's power in knowing you're not the only one carrying a mask you didn't choose. This isn't just a video. This is a mirror. And maybe for the first time in a long time, you're ready to stop looking at the surface and start seeing what's been hidden all along.